On a bright afternoon, in the middle of a crowded city square, a man stepped off the curb, and within seconds, the world around him shattered. It was all caught on camera. Every movement. Every scream. Every drop of blood on the pavement. But what investigators discovered later was far more disturbing than the daylight murder itself. Because the killer was not the only one watching. Hidden in the reflection of a shop window, another figure stood perfectly still. Filming. Waiting. As the city panicked, as sirens closed in, and as justice seemed finally within reach, a darker truth began to surface. What if the real horror was not the man who pulled the trigger, but the one who treated it like art? Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you will question whether cameras make us safer, or simply give evil a better view. The sun was high. Blinding. Unforgiving. It was just past noon when the city square filled with its usual rhythm. Street vendors shouted prices. Children laughed near the fountain. Car engines hummed in slow traffic. Nothing felt unusual. Nothing felt dangerous. Across the street stood Daniel Harper. 34 years old. A local accountant. A quiet man who preferred routine over risk. He checked his watch. 12:17 p.m. He adjusted his tie and stepped off the curb. The pedestrian light blinked white. A permission to move. High above, a security camera rotated slowly. Mounted on the corner of a brick building. Silent. Observing everything. Daniel crossed halfway. A breeze carried the smell of roasted peanuts and exhaust fumes. He felt warmth on the back of his neck. A bead of sweat slid down his spine. Then a sound cut through the air. Sharp. Metallic. A crack that did not belong to the afternoon. For a fraction of a second, nobody reacted. The brain refused to understand. Daniel stopped mid-step. His eyes widened. Confusion first. Then pain. A dark bloom spread across his pale blue shirt. Right over his heart. The crowd gasped in uneven harmony. Someone screamed. Daniel's knees weakened. He reached forward as if trying to hold on to the air itself. His briefcase slipped from his fingers. Papers scattered across the hot pavement. He collapsed. Face first. The sound of his body hitting concrete echoed louder than the gunshot. People ran. Some ducked behind cars. Others froze in place. The fountain continued to spill water as if nothing had changed. A second shot rang out. Closer this time. More precise. A woman near the bakery fell beside a newspaper stand. Her sunglasses shattered against the ground. Panic erupted fully now. Chairs overturned outside a cafe. A stroller tipped sideways. A child cried for his mother. The camera above captured every movement. Every frantic step. Every terrified face. But the shooter remained unseen. Hidden. Patient. Across the square, inside a parked delivery van, a man lowered a rifle from a narrow opening cut into the tinted window. His breathing was steady. Calculated. He watched through a scope that magnified fear. Daniel's motionless body lay centered in his view. The shooter's finger rested along the trigger guard. Not shaking. Not rushed. A third shot fired. Another victim. A man who had tried to pull Daniel to safety. Blood pooled along the cracks in the pavement. Bright against gray stone. Sirens wailed in the distance. Growing louder. The shooter closed his eyes briefly. As if savoring the moment. Then he started the engine. The van merged into traffic. Slow. Ordinary. Invisible among dozens of similar vehicles. Within minutes, police flooded the square. Yellow tape stretched across chaos. Paramedics knelt beside Daniel. One pressed gloved fingers against his neck, searching for a pulse that was no longer there. A detective looked upward. At the camera. He knew it had seen everything. Back at the station, officers replayed the footage. Frame by frame. Daniel stepping off the curb. The instant impact. The direction of his fall. Analysts measured angles. Calculated trajectories. The bullets had come from the southwest corner. From street level. Not from a rooftop. A parked vehicle. One officer zoomed in. There. A white delivery van. Parked too perfectly between two sedans. Its window slightly darker than the others. The timestamp showed it arriving 20 minutes before the shooting. No company logo. No license plate visible from the front. The van left exactly 40 seconds after the final shot. 40 seconds of cold discipline. Investigators tracked traffic cameras along the route. One intersection caught the rear plate clearly. Registered to a storage facility outside town. Rented under a false name. But fingerprints waited inside. Partial. Enough to match. The name surfaced on the screen. Victor Hale. Former military sharpshooter. Discharged 5 years earlier. Known for precision. Known for silence. His apartment walls were bare when officers forced entry. No furniture. No photographs. Only a folding table with a city map spread open. 3 red circles marked the square. Daniel Harper's name appeared on a printed sheet beside it. So did the names of the other victims. Strangers to one another. Connected by one thing. They had served as jurors. 6 months earlier. In the trial of Victor Hale's younger brother. Convicted of armed robbery. Sentenced to 20 years. Victor had attended every session. Sitting in the back row. Watching. Memorizing faces. The camera in the courtroom had captured him too. Still. Expressionless. Investigators realized the square was not random. It was deliberate. A stage in broad daylight. A message. As night fell over the shaken city, officers traced Victor's last known movements to a rural cabin. Lights flickered inside. A silhouette moved behind thin curtains. The air outside felt heavy. Thick with anticipation. Officers surrounded the property. Weapons raised. A command echoed through a loudspeaker. Silence answered. Then one final shot erupted from within the cabin. Single. Definitive. When the door was breached, Victor Hale lay on the wooden floor. The rifle beside him. A small television in the corner played a news broadcast. Footage from the square looped repeatedly. Daniel stepping off the curb. The precise moment life ended. Victor's eyes remained open. Fixed on the screen. As if he had wanted to witness his own legacy. The camera had recorded everything. The crime. The panic. The escape. The face of the man who believed daylight made him untouchable. But daylight sees clearly. And cameras never blink. The footage spread across every news channel by morning. Grainy. Cold. Unforgiving. Viewers watched Daniel Harper fall again and again. They leaned closer to their screens. As if proximity could change the outcome. It never did. In the evidence room, the rifle rested inside a sealed container. Black metal. Polished. Impersonal. Detectives studied it beneath fluorescent lights. They traced the serial number. Filed the paperwork. Documented every detail with clinical precision. Yet something about the case refused to feel finished. 3 jurors had been targeted. 3 had died. But 12 had served in that courtroom. 12 had delivered the verdict. Why only 3 names on Victor's list? Why only 3 red circles on the map? A young analyst named Marissa requested access to Victor's laptop recovered from the cabin. The device was encrypted, layered with military-grade protection. It took 48 hours to break through. When the final barrier fell, a single folder appeared on the desktop, labeled simply as Phase 2. Inside were photographs, surveillance images of the remaining jurors, taken from a distance. Outside grocery stores, near schools, walking dogs, living ordinary lives. Marissa felt her throat tighten. The room seemed smaller, the air thinner. Victor had planned more. Much more. One document stood out among the files. A manifesto. Not rambling. Not chaotic. Structured. Methodical. He described justice as a performance. He wrote that the courtroom had stolen his brother. He believed fear was the only language the city would understand. At the bottom of the document was a date. 3 days from the shooting. Another public location marked with coordinates. A courthouse memorial service for the victims. Open to the public. Televised live. The realization struck like ice water. Victor had not intended to end his life. He had intended to disappear. The shot inside the cabin. The body on the floor. The rifle placed neatly beside him. Too neat. Forensic results returned that afternoon. The fatal wound trajectory was inconsistent with a self-inflicted shot. The angle was wrong. The powder burns were absent. The cabin had been staged. Victor Hale was still alive. The news of this discovery remained classified. Panic would only serve him. Police quietly evacuated the memorial venue. Plainclothes officers blended into the surrounding streets. Snipers positioned on rooftops. Eyes scanning windows. Doorways. Vehicles. The day of the memorial arrived beneath a gray sky. Clouds pressed low over the courthouse steps. Families of the victims gathered in black clothing. Grief heavy in their posture. Daniel's mother clutched a framed photograph of her son. Her hands trembled. Cameras from national networks lined the perimeter. Broadcast vans hummed softly. Live feeds counting down. Marissa stood inside the command vehicle, monitoring traffic cameras in real time. Her pulse matched the ticking clock on the screen. 10 minutes before the ceremony, a white utility truck turned onto Main Street. Unmarked. Unremarkable. It parked 2 blocks away. The driver remained inside. Still. Marissa zoomed in. The side mirror reflected a partial view of the driver's face. Sharp jaw. Focused eyes. Victor. Her voice cut through the radio channel. Units mobilized instantly. But Victor moved faster. The truck door opened. He stepped out carrying a duffel bag. Not toward the courthouse. Toward a rooftop access ladder on a nearby building. Officers pursued on foot. Boots pounding against pavement. Victor climbed with calm efficiency. Each movement controlled. On the rooftop, he assembled the rifle with mechanical familiarity. Below, the memorial began. Speakers addressed the crowd. Voices breaking with emotion. Daniel's mother stepped toward the podium. She lifted the photograph higher. Victor aligned the scope. Centered on her chest. His breathing slowed. Inhale. Exhale. The world narrowed to a single circle of glass. Marissa burst through the rooftop door with 2 officers behind her. Wind whipped across the building. Victor sensed movement. He turned slightly. Just enough. The rifle fired. The shot tore through the air. But the bullet missed its intended target. It struck the stone edge of the courthouse steps. Chaos erupted below once more. Marissa lunged forward. An officer tackled Victor from behind. The rifle skidded across the gravel surface. Victor struggled fiercely. Silent. Determined. His eyes burned with fury. He reached toward a handgun at his ankle. Marissa kicked it away. Another officer secured his wrists in steel cuffs. For the first time, Victor spoke. His voice low. Disappointed. He said the camera would have loved this angle. He said the city needed another lesson. Sirens echoed again through downtown. But this time they signaled capture. Not escape. Victor Hale was escorted down the building stairs. Past reporters. Past flashing lights. His face finally visible without shadow. The same cameras that had recorded his violence now recorded his defeat. Inside the courthouse, Daniel's mother collapsed into tears. Overwhelmed. Alive. The trial that followed drew national attention. Every piece of footage was shown to the jury. The square. The van. The rooftop. Victor watched himself on screen. Expression unreadable. When the verdict was delivered, the courtroom remained silent. Guilty on all counts. Life imprisonment without parole. No stage. No audience. Just consequences. Years later, the footage still circulates in documentaries and training seminars. A reminder of how quickly ordinary moments can fracture. How a bright afternoon can transform into horror within a single breath. The camera that captured Daniel's final steps remains mounted on the brick corner. Weathered now. Faded by sun and rain. It continues to rotate slowly above the square. Watching vendors set up stands. Watching children chase pigeons near the fountain. Watching life resume. Always recording. The city tried to move forward. Routine returned in careful layers. Cafes reopened their outdoor seating. Vendors rearranged their carts beneath the same sun. People crossed the same intersection. Yet something invisible lingered in the air. A tension that never fully dissolved. At night, the square felt different. Quieter. Heavier. The fountain's water sounded louder against the silence. The security camera continued its slow rotation. Its lens catching reflections of streetlights. Months passed. Victor Hale disappeared into a maximum security facility far from the city he had scarred. His name faded from headlines. But the footage did not. A production company acquired rights to the recordings. They began assembling a true crime documentary. Interviews. Slow-motion replays. Expert analysis layered over tragedy. Marissa was asked to participate. She agreed reluctantly. Sitting beneath studio lights felt nothing like standing on that rooftop. The host asked her what she remembered most. She did not mention the gun. She did not mention the chase. She described the sound of Daniel's briefcase hitting the pavement. How ordinary it sounded. How wrong it felt. The documentary aired on a Sunday night. Millions watched. Millions witnessed the square through the camera's unblinking eye. Viewers studied every frame. Every shadow. Every passing face. 2 weeks after the broadcast, the police department received an anonymous email. No greeting. No signature. Attached was a still image from the original footage. Time-stamped 12:16 and 58 seconds p.m. 19 seconds before the first shot. The message contained a single sentence. You missed him. Detectives reopened the archived video immediately. They rewound to the specified second. Daniel stepping off the curb. Traffic moving normally. Pedestrians mid-stride. Nothing unusual. Then Marissa leaned closer to the screen. In the reflection of a shop window behind Daniel, a figure stood across the street. Partially obscured. Not Victor. This man wore a dark baseball cap. He held a phone up at chest level. Pointed directly toward Daniel. Filming. The angle suggested anticipation. As if he knew exactly where to look. Frame by frame, they enhanced the image. The face remained blurry. But the posture was clear. Still. Prepared. The timestamp showed the man lowering the phone seconds after the first shot. He did not run immediately. He turned. Walked calmly out of frame. No panic in his movement. No confusion. Investigators searched for additional footage from nearby cameras. One captured the man entering a subway station 2 blocks away. He removed his cap briefly beneath fluorescent lights. Just enough for partial facial recognition. The system returned no match. No criminal record. No identification. It was as if he existed only in that reflection. Marissa replayed Victor's manifesto. Read every line again. He wrote about justice. About revenge. About sending a message. But there was no mention of an accomplice. No hint of partnership. Unless he had chosen to omit it. The anonymous email was traced through encrypted servers overseas. A deliberate attempt to conceal origin. Yet one detail unsettled the entire team. The still image attached had been enhanced. Stabilized. Cropped precisely around the reflection. Whoever sent it had access to the raw footage. Access limited to investigators and the production company. An internal review began quietly. Editors. Technicians. Archivists. Background checks were conducted. Interviews repeated. No one confessed. No evidence surfaced. One evening, long after others had left the office, Marissa remained alone reviewing files. The station lights dimmed automatically at midnight. Her screen glowed in the darkness. She paused again at 12:16 and 58 seconds p.m. The reflected figure seemed almost clearer now. As if stepping closer with every viewing. Her phone vibrated on the desk. An unknown number. She hesitated. Then answered. Silence greeted her first. Soft breathing followed. Measured. Calm. A male voice finally spoke. Low. Steady. He said the camera sees many things. But it does not understand what it sees. Marissa felt her pulse hammer against her ribs. She demanded a name. The caller ignored the question. He said Victor believed he was the architect. But every architect needs an observer. Someone to ensure the structure stands. The line disconnected. No trace. No location data. Only the echo of that voice lingering in her ear. Security footage from the station lobby showed no one entering or leaving during the call. The number proved untraceable. The next morning, another package arrived at the department. No return address. Inside was a flash drive. Contained on it was a short video clip. Recorded from a different angle on the day of the shooting. Not from a security camera. From a handheld device. The frame was steady. Focused precisely on Daniel seconds before impact. The shot rang out. The camera did not flinch. It zoomed slightly as Daniel fell. As if documenting the effect. A quiet voice behind the lens whispered a single word. Beautiful. The clip ended there. No further clues. No metadata to trace. Marissa watched the footage alone in the evidence room. The air felt colder than usual. She realized the square had never been just a stage for one man's revenge. It had been an exhibition. Observed. Appreciated. Recorded from more than one perspective. The mounted camera still rotates above the intersection each day. Capturing laughter. Capturing arguments. Capturing life in motion. People rarely look up at it. They assume it is there for protection. For safety. They trust that being seen means being secure. But somewhere, perhaps in another crowded place under another bright sky, someone else may be holding a phone very still. Waiting. Winter settled over the city. The square turned pale beneath a thin layer of frost. Breath lingered in the air like fading ghosts. Holiday lights wrapped around lampposts. Soft. Deceptively cheerful. Marissa stopped crossing the square on foot. She drove around it instead. Windows up. Doors locked. She replayed the whispered word in her mind each night. Beautiful. It felt wrong inside her head. Like a stain that would not wash away. The department formed a quiet task force. Unofficial. Unpublicized. They named the unknown figure the observer. Because that was what he seemed to be. Not the architect. Not the executioner. But the witness who desired proximity to horror. For weeks, nothing surfaced. No emails. No calls. No packages. Then, just after midnight on a Tuesday, an alert pinged from the city surveillance network. An unauthorized login attempt. Access requested to archived footage from the square. Timestamped precisely at 12:16 and 58 seconds p.m. Again. The breach originated from a public library 3 districts away. Patrol units arrived within minutes. The computer terminal still glowed. The chair still warm. But the user had vanished. Security cameras inside the library showed a man in a dark coat. Baseball cap low over his eyes. He never looked directly at a lens. He moved with awareness. Intentional blind spots. Intentional angles. At the exit, he paused briefly. Turning his head just enough. Not toward the door. Toward the camera. As if acknowledging it. As if acknowledging them. Marissa studied the footage until her eyes burned. She noticed something new. A small silver ring on the man's right hand. Engraved with a pattern. 3 interlocking lines. Subtle. Distinct. The image was enhanced and circulated quietly among regional databases. No match. No symbol identified. Days later, another city experienced a shooting. Broad daylight. Public park. 1 victim. A local council member. Security footage showed the shooter fleeing into a wooded area. Arrested within hours. A disgruntled employee. Acting alone. The case appeared straightforward. Until Marissa saw a still frame released by that city's police. In the background, near a food cart, stood a man holding a phone at chest level. Dark coat. Baseball cap. Silver ring catching sunlight. Filming steadily. Not running when the shot was fired. Not startled. Simply observing. Her stomach tightened. The observer traveled. He hunted moments of rupture. Collected them. Like trophies no one else could see. Interagency communication began immediately. Quiet coordination. Shared databases. Enhanced watch lists. But the observer left no digital trail beyond what he wanted found. He did not post online. He did not boast. He documented. Then disappeared. Months passed. Then a pattern emerged. Every incident he attended involved cameras. High visibility. Public broadcast. Moments guaranteed to be replayed. It was never about obscurity. It was about amplification. The violence was the spark. The footage was the flame. One evening, Marissa received another call from an unknown number. She answered without hesitation. This time there was no silence. Only the hum of distant traffic. The same steady voice spoke. He said she was beginning to understand. He said tragedy without witness fades too quickly. He believed he was preserving history. Curating it. She demanded to know why. His answer arrived without emotion. Because people only look up when something falls. The line ended again. But this time, a trace lasted long enough. Cell tower triangulation narrowed his location to the square itself. Units converged within minutes. Snow crunched beneath their boots. The fountain stood frozen. The mounted camera rotated slowly above. Scanning. Recording. Marissa stepped into the center of the intersection. Her breath visible. Her heart pounding against the silence. She felt watched. Not by the camera. By something closer. A figure stood near the bakery window. Dark coat. Baseball cap. Phone raised steadily. Pointed directly at her. She met his gaze across the street. For the first time, he did not turn away. His eyes were calm. Curious. Almost gentle. As if she were the subject of his next collection. Officers approached from both ends of the block. Slow. Strategic. The observer lowered his phone slightly. A faint smile touched his lips. Then he spoke loudly enough for her to hear across the cold air. He said, "This is the part where everyone expects the ending." His hand slipped into his coat pocket. Officers shouted commands. Weapons drawn. Snow began to fall more heavily. Soft flakes drifting between them. For a suspended moment, the entire square seemed to hold its breath. The camera above captured every angle. Every movement. Every expression. The observer's hand emerged from his pocket. Not with a gun. But with a small remote device. He pressed a button. Somewhere nearby, a sharp crack split the winter air. Glass shattered behind Marissa. Crowds screamed from the sidewalks. And the camera kept turning. The shattered glass rained onto the frozen pavement behind Marissa. Not from an explosion. From a single sniper round. Precise. Measured. The bullet struck the mounted security camera above the square. Metal sparked. The lens fractured. Its rotation faltered. Then stopped. For the first time in years, the square was no longer being watched from above. A blind eye overlooking a crowd frozen in fear. The observer's smile widened slightly. He had not aimed at people. He had aimed at the witness. Officers closed the distance in seconds. One tackled him to the ground. The remote slid across the icy street. Another officer secured his arms. Steel cuffs clicked into place. The crowd remained stunned. Expecting more. Expecting blood. But none came. Marissa stood still beneath the broken camera. Tiny shards of glass at her feet. Her breath uneven. The observer turned his head toward her as they lifted him up. His expression was calm. Satisfied. He said the city would finally understand what it meant to look without seeing. He said now they would notice the silence. He was taken away without resistance. Inside the interrogation room, he offered no real name. No past worth tracing. His phone contained hundreds of videos. Moments of disaster from different cities. Different years. Fires. Accidents. Violence. All recorded from steady hands. Labeled by date and location. Organized with care. There were no uploads. No evidence of sharing. The collection was private. A gallery for one. Psychological evaluations described him as detached. Not driven by rage. Not driven by revenge. Driven by fascination. He believed events only mattered if preserved. He saw himself as an archivist of rupture. The court proceedings were quiet compared to Victor Hale's trial. There were no dramatic outbursts. No manifestos. Only evidence. Only patterns. He received multiple life sentences. Not for pulling triggers, but for aiding, encouraging, and deliberately positioning himself to magnify violence. The broken camera was replaced within a week. A newer model. Higher resolution. Stronger casing. It resumed its slow rotation above the square. Watching vendors return. Watching children throw coins into the fountain. Watching couples argue and reconcile. Life filled the space again. Cautious at first. Then gradually ordinary. Marissa visited the square one evening at sunset. The sky burned orange behind the brick buildings. She stood where Daniel had fallen. Cars moved through the intersection. Pedestrians laughed. Someone played music from a nearby shop. She looked up at the new camera. It turned smoothly. Unbroken. Reliable. She understood something then. The camera had never been the villain. Nor the hero. It simply recorded. The meaning came from those who acted within its frame. Violence required a hand. Obsession required a mind. But healing required something quieter. People choosing to return. Choosing to live despite what had been captured. As darkness settled, streetlights flickered on. The square glowed softly beneath them. Above, the lens reflected the lights like distant stars. Watching. Not with hunger. Not with judgment. Just witnessing. And this time, the city did not look away.